Russia uses new tactics, Ukraine's strongest brigade paralyzed.
Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade, formed according to NATO standards, was redeployed from the Rabatino front to Avdiivka and then to Kursk for emergency missions, but it was incapacitated by Russian forces.
Russia has abandoned its previous overwhelming numbers strategy and is employing new tactics. The Times, UK, published an article by its war correspondent in Ukraine, interviewing officers and soldiers from the 47th Mechanized Brigade, one of Ukraine's most elite units.
This brigade is heavily equipped with NATO weaponry, particularly heavy arms from the US and Germany.
The brigade's command quality and training are considered top tier within the Ukrainian military.
Deployed from Rabatino to reinforce Avdiivka in January, the brigade failed to stop the collapse of this stronghold and was forced to gradually retreat northwest of Avdiivka, east of Pokrovsk, the focal point of the fighting in the Donetsk area. Since taking Avdiivka in February, the Russian Armed Forces, RFAF, have concentrated their attacks on Pokrovsk, a transportation hub and gateway to Dnipropetrovsk.
If Russian forces capture Pokrovsk, it would destabilize Ukraine's defense line in southeastern Donetsk. In interviews, Ukrainian officers and soldiers acknowledged Russia's advancements, which have led to victories.
First and foremost, the RFAF has abandoned its rigid tactics of using mass numbers and firepower in an overwhelming force strategy during the Avdiivka battle. While this approach put psychological pressure on Ukraine's armed forces, AFU, it resulted in heavy losses due to Ukraine's dense FPV drone and artillery strikes. However, in the later stages, Ukrainian forces ran out of artillery shells and were left defending only with infantry weapons.
Meanwhile, Russian electronic warfare significantly suppressed Ukraine's drones, grounding them. Russia's new strategy now involves platoon-level breakthroughs, splitting into three-man combat teams to increase the density of frontline attackers.
These teams work closely with one another, sometimes supported by artillery or tanks, stealthily approaching enemy positions for surprise attacks. These Russian combat teams are well-trained, with their weapons specifically tailored for tactical needs.
If an assault fails, they don't act recklessly. Instead, support teams provide cover as they retreat, backed by artillery. If the attack succeeds, and they capture key tactical points, they immediately transition to a temporary defensive stance, holding the ground for follow-up units to advance. On the other hand, if they cannot advance, they complete their reconnaissance mission by identifying Ukrainian positions and immediately calling in artillery or tactical bombers to drop guided bombs on the enemy. Such tactics recall the historical 3-3 system, dispersing forces and minimizing losses from enemy artillery while ensuring tight coordination between different groups, multiplying their combat effectiveness. This flexible approach allows the RFAF to switch between offensive and defensive modes, easily dispersing or regrouping. However, it requires high competency from lower-level commanders and well-trained soldiers. This indicates that the Russian military has learned to fight within the war and significantly improved its combat efficiency compared to the early stages of the conflict, a concerning development for the Ukrainian forces. Ukraine's Red Brother Brigade severely depleted. In interviews, officers and soldiers of the 47th Brigade admitted to heavy losses. The brutal fighting has drained personnel and equipment, with many soldiers exhausted and the defense lines constantly breaking. The brigade's combat effectiveness has been severely weakened. It's not an exaggeration to say the 47th Brigade has been paralyzed. Numerous US-supplied weapons, including expensive M1 Abrams main battle tanks and M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, were destroyed by Russian forces, leaving burning wreckage on the battlefield. Some tanks were abandoned by their crews and captured by Russian forces as trophies. The 47th Brigade, organized according to NATO standards, includes 3 mechanized infantry battalions equipped with M2 Bradley vehicles, 1 assault battalion, 1 regular infantry battalion, and 1 tank battalion equipped with the most modern Leopard 2 tanks from Germany and M1 Abrams from the US. Its artillery support comprises 1 artillery battalion with 5 companies, including a US-made 155mm M109 self-propelled howitzer company, a 122mm D-30 towed howitzer company, and a 122mm BM-21 rocket launcher company, all Soviet-made. It also has an anti-tank company with mixed weaponry and a short-range air defense missile company, overall boasting powerful firepower and advanced equipment. The predecessor of the 47th Mechanized Brigade was the 47th Special Forces Battalion, which participated in the brutal offensive and defensive Battle of Bakhmut. After suffering heavy losses, the unit returned to the rear, was retrained and re-equipped by NATO, and expanded into a brigade. It was once seen as a model for Ukraine's NATO-oriented army. The 47th Brigade first saw action in Rabotino, Zaporizhia, during Ukraine's summer counteroffensive of 2023. After struggling for over 3 months to advance just 10 kilometers, it incurred heavy losses. After replenishing its forces, the brigade was sent to Avdiivka in early 2024. Following Avdiivka's fall, the brigade continued to fight back against Russian attacks west of Avdiivka. It then participated in the defense of Pokrovsk alongside other forces, suffering further losses. Now, this elite Ukrainian brigade is once again shedding blood in the Kursk region of Russia, with numerous modern Leopard and Abrams tanks burned on the battlefield.